about great players. Caitlin was one of them. Paige is one of them right now. And we tend to forget the narrative about...
Yes, she called out Paige Bueckers' legacy and Caitlin Clark's legacy in a press conference, and we finna react.
What about us? Dawn Staley's voice echoed through the press room as she confronted a reporter about the Caitlin Clark and Paige Bueckers narratives. The South Carolina coach wasn't just upset, she was standing up for her undefeated team that seemed invisible in the media's eyes. The clash between celebrating individual stars and recognizing team excellence has never been more explosive in women's basketball.
Staley's whole thing about it is that her team did historic things too. People need to talk about her team, but I want to know you guys.
Was Staley right to call out the media bias? Or is this just the natural spotlight that generational talents like Clark and Bueckers deserve? The answer isn't as simple as you might think.
I'm gonna tread lightly with this. Here's the thing. You know, sometimes we create these narratives.
Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. You ever notice how some players get all the attention while others get none? That's exactly what Dawn Staley was talking about when she stepped to the mic at that press conference right before the NCAA National Championship game. The timing couldn't have been more perfect or more frustrating for Staley. Here was her South Carolina team absolutely dominating with an undefeated season, ready to play for the championship. And what were reporters asking about? Caitlin Clark and Paige Bueckers. Imagine putting together one of the greatest seasons in college basketball history. Your team hasn't lost a single game. Your players are executing at an elite level. You've beaten every challenger that stepped on the court.
About Paige, great freaking player. Like anybody would start their franchise with Paige.
And then you sit down at a press conference before the biggest game of the year and reporters can't stop asking about players on other teams. That's the reality Staley was facing. The South Carolina coach wasn't just dealing with a one-time annoyance either. This had been building all season long. Every press conference, every interview, every media appearance, somehow the conversation would shift to Clark or Bueckers. What do you think about Caitlin's scoring? How would you defend against Paige? Meanwhile, Staley's players were putting together historic performances that barely got a headline. The numbers don't lie.
I want the sentiments to be about our players and what our players been able to do. Equally, because there's room to do both.
Yes, she called out Paige Bueckers' legacy and Caitlin Clark's legacy in a press conference, and we finna react.
When you look at media coverage throughout the season, Clark and Bueckers dominated airtime, social media mentions, and front page stories. ESPN would run special segments on Clark's three-point shooting or Bueckers' comeback from injury. But South Carolina's perfect record, that might get a quick mention at the bottom of the screen. For Staley, this wasn't just about her own ego. She was watching her players, women who had sacrificed everything to be the best, getting overlooked despite achieving perfection. These athletes were making history, setting records, and showcasing extraordinary teamwork. Yet they couldn't get a fraction of the media love being showered on a few individual stars.
Because she deserves that. Can raise our players up because they deserve that. And that's not talked about enough. There's room for our game, Mike.
South Carolina players would check their phones after games and see their timelines flooded with highlights of other players, even when they just won by 20 points. They'd hear commentators spend entire broadcasts talking about matchups involving Clark or Bueckers that hadn't even happened yet, while barely analyzing the game they were actually playing in. You think that doesn't get to a team? The breaking point came at the most crucial moment, right before the championship game. A reporter asked Staley about Bueckers' legacy and place in basketball history, not about South Carolina's undefeated run, not about her own team's chance to cement their legacy, but about another player who wasn't even on her team.
You have a player in Paige who obviously is one of the best in the country right now and has had an injured play career, but really good, you know her well.
That's when Staley decided enough was enough. But notice how she handled it. She didn't attack the players getting attention. She challenged the narrative. In her own words, let's not choose one player over another player's history because we're all creating history for our game.
For all of us to be covered. Let's not choose a history, one's history over another.
This wasn't about tearing down Clark or Bueckers. It was about lifting up everyone who deserved recognition. What Staley was really saying was, why can't we celebrate all the greatness in women's basketball? Why does the spotlight have to be so narrow that it only illuminates one or two players?
About great players. Caitlin was one of them. Paige is one of them right now. And we tend to forget the narrative about, it's all over TikTok, it's all over SportsCenter, it's all over all of that. And she's a great player.
The media was painting a picture where only certain stories mattered. Only certain players were worth watching. Only certain achievements deserved celebration. Think about it this way. South Carolina was about to play in the championship game after an undefeated season, one of the hardest things to accomplish in sports. Yet the conversation wasn't centered on this incredible achievement. It was as if their perfect season was somehow less compelling than individual stats from players who weren't even playing in the same game. This is why Staley spoke up. Because when media coverage becomes this unbalanced, it doesn't just affect press clippings. It affects how fans perceive the sport.
Well, and winning championships. I remember you eloquently spoke last year about Caitlin and how winning a title does not define a legacy, since you yourself have been in the Final Four many times. And
it affects which games people watch. It affects sponsorships, endorsements, and ultimately how much respect and support the entire women's game receives. Her stand wasn't just about defending her team, though that was certainly part of it. It was about ensuring that women's basketball tells its full story, not just the parts that fit neatly into familiar narratives or that center on the most marketable faces. She wanted recognition for every athlete making history, for every team changing the game, for every story worth telling.
Let's not choose one player over another player's history, because we're all creating history.
Like Don Staley had time today, because she just took shots at Paige Bueckers and Caitlin Clark.
And here's what Staley was really saying. It's not about tearing down Clark or Bueckers, but lifting everyone up. When she talked about celebrating both individual brilliance and team achievements, she was speaking facts. Why should we have to choose between appreciating a shooter's incredible range or a team's perfect season?
Don Staley went on to win, but she's saying that it was a crazy narrative created about Caitlin Clark winning this championship.
Next time you're watching women's basketball, just take a second to notice who the cameras focus on and who they ignore. It's crazy how some stories get amplified while others fade into the background. What Staley wants is simple, a women's basketball world where every contribution gets its flowers. Not just the flashiest players, but everyone making history.